Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have, yes, an Invicta review for you guys. Didn't see this coming at all. Don't get me wrong, guys. As a watch collector, I've definitely handled my fair share of Invictas, kind of on my climb through the watch game. And, you know, there is, of course, the universally decent Invicta 8926 OB, which is kind of known as probably the best $80 or less sub homage. This one is actually more of an homage to the original Submariner back in 1954, even pre-Big Crown, even pre-Rolex hands, pencil hands. This is like original inspirations, but it's done actually at a scale that is more closely, I'd say, somewhere in between your Black Bay 41 and your Black Bay 39. So of course Invicta as a brand, they're the infamous revival brand originally founded back in 1837, but have since really had a fall from grace and just are generally known for kind of tacky watches that people really collect hardcore. I mean, there are people that have watch boxes full of Invictas and they're enthusiasts, so that's cool. I mean, I'm happy to have people into, you know, the hobby, but I think a lot of people grow out of it, and they're probably you know, a little bit better off for that. But every once in a while you find a model from a brand and you're just like, okay, all right, Invicta, you guys are actually like paying attention to what's going on in the market, and you guys are you know, trying to fill a space that I think is pretty smart. So of course, let's talk about this. This is, of course, is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in design language when you're looking for a dive watch. Of course, you're going to want something that's water resistant, typically some type of screw down crown. You want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if it's on bracelet. This is the Invicta Pro Diver 1953. And basically, it's an automatic diver inspired by the original pencil-handed Submariner pre-Big Crown from 1953. The retail price is $189, but typically you can get them for just under $100. When it comes to sale prices, you'll find online it has a 40mm case, a 14mm thickness, and a 49mm lug-to-lug. It is made out of stainless steel and is fully brushed with some nice polished accents. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look. All right, guys, here it is, the Invicta. A little bit more about this guy here. It does have a mineral crystal, which is flat, and honestly, for the price, that's what I would expect. You know, there's tons of Seikos that are a lot more expensive that have mineral crystals. Of course, they're their proprietary hardlex crystals, but nonetheless, they're not sapphire. So, you know, a watch at $100 not having a sapphire crystal isn't a huge letdown. The bezel action is 120 clicks unidirectional. It's actually pretty nice. Definitely felt worse. Definitely felt better. But there's not much play or anything like that. I will say that like the actual exact lineup where it rests isn't quite there. You know, it's like half a click more and you get there, but where the bezel rests, so it's like right in that amount of play, so you can get it there if you just creep a little bit forward without creeping it all the way up to the next click. It does line up pretty well, so that's definitely well done, especially at the price point. The crown is screw down and signed. It's not a big crown style. It is crown guardless, but you can see those beautiful polished bevels there, which is, you know, I think that's a big surprise, especially at a watch at this price point, and especially one that's sporting an NH35 movement from Seiko Instruments. So you get hacking and hand winding. It's also actually 200 meters water resistant. So screw down crown, of course, signed, display case back. I mean, that's a lot. Sure, these end links are, you know, they're hollow, but hey, at least it is a female end link, so it's not adding anything to that lug to lug of 49 millimeters. And of course, this is made in stainless steel. The crown actually, I think, is pretty nicely detailed. The sign there, they could have done it much a cheaper affair, but I think they did a nice job with the design there, as you guys can see. Very sharp, very nice looking from that aspect. Now, as far as the dial goes, pretty simple and straightforward here, guys. You're really getting that matte black, everything. You know, of course, the dial does match with the aluminum bezel insert there. Nicely matted, almost satinized finish. You do have the polished hands, of course, all gilt accented. The gilt dial there as well, which does pay homage to the original Submariner. And then the bracelet is nice. It's just 20 millimeters at the lugs, so you're gonna be able to put this on tons of different straps. And this does, you know, it's a very basic bracelet, but it's solid feeling. Like these links here are quite solid. It does have some heft to it, although these are just friction, you know, pins there, directional, pretty simple. And then this is just, you know, stamped clasp, stamped from the outside and on the inner folding portion. But you know, if you took this watch back to 1953, they'd probably be pretty impressed with the build quality on it, because honestly, this is the type of clasp, that pressed clasp there, that was on the original sub. Except, of course, it definitely, the idea of having a display case back in 200 meters of water resistance would be a very impressive feat back in 1954. So from that aspect, they're definitely doing a bit better. And it does have a decent taper to it, going from 20 millimeters down to 18. It would have been nice to go down to 16 and more that kind of traditional sub fashion, but you know, it's something that people won't complain about anyway, so not a big deal from that standpoint. You can see also you do get micro adjust holes, so you can get this fitting just right. So yeah, it's a pretty simple, straightforward watch, and for $100, that's kind of what you would expect. What really makes this watch special is the aesthetic, guys. $100, you're getting essentially a very clean and quite accurate reinterpretation of the original Submariner. They didn't take a bunch of liberties. I mean, obviously they made the size more modern. I believe the original pencil-handed subs were, I want to say 38 or smaller, and then they were eventually sized up to 39 and 40 as the Submariner kind of became an actual icon. But yeah, this is even before the big crown, so this looks more like a modern crown without crown guards on it versus kind of an old school big crown. So they were even accurate to that point. Even in the grading, of course, the indexing on the bezel insert. Also, you know, they didn't do any indexing for any amount of time, so it's also very accurate from that standpoint as well. And the 20 millimeter lug width, I mean, there's so many premium NATOs, you guys have seen them all on my channel before. You're going to be able to put this thing on and it's really going to take it up a notch. I mean, you can get NATOs now that are right at home and watches that cost thousands and thousands of dollars, and the NATOs themselves are $40, $50. And you can get even cheaper ones, you know, $20, $30 ones that will still really spice up a watch. So you know, don't be just totally turned off by the bracelet, but it's nice to have it, you know, I think. But you know, this one is definitely going to be really great on a Bond style NATO. I mean, let's be honest, that's how most people are going to interpret this, as kind of an original Connery kind of Bond look with the gilt dial. But really nice, you know. I'm surprised to have this watch on the channel for review, but once I saw it, I was like, man, people are probably going to know about this one. Not because I think there's a bunch of Invicta fans subscribed to the channel, but there's a lot of fans of kind of that bargain deal and that Submariner aesthetic. I think everybody loves that, you know, very proportional, very symmetrical look, and that definitely is happening here, and it's definitely also very readable. So let's go ahead and get this piece on wrist so you guys can get an idea of how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7 1/4 inch wrist, this 40 millimeter diver does wear like you'd expect. It's wears like a full-sized watch, doesn't feel diminutive or small in any way, and definitely doesn't feel oversized either. Of course, the dial is probably on the larger side for something that you would find at 40 millimeters, but it actually gives it more of a modern feel, and also, of course, keeps it very, very legible at the same time. And I think, you know, one thing that also to commend Invicta for was that they look at the hand length on that. You know, there's a lot of times they've come up with short hands, and just in general, when sub homages just, you know, are kind of a mishmash of pieces, so they don't all fit together correctly. The hands don't line up with the dial really nice, but here I gotta say that the hands line up with the dial really, really nicely. So props on that. You can see there on these bevels absolutely look actually just outstanding, considering, I mean, that's a big fat polished bevel with a really nice sharp transition. So impressive from that standpoint. The sides of the case, of course, are more in kind of a side slab nature, similar to the Black Bay, but I think they are even a bit thinner and more contoured, which is more indicative of kind of the vintage you know, big crown Rolexes of the past. So I think that's actually still a nice touch, and it does wrap around the wrist quite well. And then, of course, the bracelet itself is quite decent. So yeah, what do you guys think of it on the wrist? I think it's pretty cool, and I could easily see this thing on a gray NATO strap just rocking, as well as, you know, modern bond black with the gray stripes, or black with the green stripes, and then the red kind of pinstriping as well, for kind of the vintage bond style. So it's a looker, guys. You can't really argue with the look of this timepiece, because it's, you know, completely derivative of truly iconic watches out there. So with all that said, let's actually set up some low light and lume shots for you guys. All right, we'll go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, quite legible there. The lume pip, not as bright as the rest, but everything else looks pretty good. Also, you'll notice that the lollipop seconds hand is not lumed, but that's actually part of kind of the period correctness, so you can't be too upset with that. And honestly, although this is marketed as a diver, it still definitely does the job. It'd be nice to have that running seconds and be just a little bit more authentic to kind of today's diver standards. But, you know, the low light transition lets you know that this thing is actually still pretty legible. Look at that in the transitional light, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field out in direct sunlight, like my studio lights are going to be able to simulate. Sometimes you're going to be coming in and out of a building, coming in and out of a vehicle, or just generally being in less than optimal direct sunlight. So one thing also, as you can see, you can take a look at the finishes on the steel, how the light, how uniform it is as it crosses over that brushing. You can also take a look at the actual finish on the black metal there. You can see the matteness of that very nice bezel insert. It catches so much light and retains it due to the matte finish that it almost appears kind of ghosted and gray in a lot of lighting situations, while the dial itself does tend to stay very and truly black, which is a nice feature. Get a little closer there, add a little bit more light. You can see some of kind of the texturing on the dial, that kind of light matte egg finish almost to it. So really nice, guys. I think this one definitely is a looker. It wears okay, and it's super cheap. I mean, that's pretty insane. Sure, it has a big old Invicta written there right below the 12, but hey, I mean, there's definitely worse things to say on a watch dial. I mean, there's brands that are out there that are just a bunch of random letters. Nobody knows what they are. There's fashion brands out there too that have absolutely no background. At least Invicta does have some name recognition, and they have made some decent quality timepieces. Of course, the pricing and the marketing has been most people's real issues with Invicta. But this one, I think, for what it's marketed at and what it's trying to do, I think it hit the mark, really. On the wrist, you know, it does have slightly larger proportions that make it feel more kind of like a Black Bay 41 versus a Black Bay 39. And it is probably a little bit heftier feeling on the wrist than you would think just by looking at it. Of course, I think when you look at it, you kind of imagine it visually feeling more like a 38 or 39, but when you get it in person, honestly, it's a true 40, and I'd say it's probably more closely relatable to a 41, like the more modern Black Bay. Comparable models, guys, the market is currently saturated with vintage inspired divers, but there's not too many of them that are under $100 that actually have hacking. So there's a lot of like straight knockoff clones of, say, let's say something like the Black Bay, but under $100 with hacking movements. That's not, you're not always going to find that. So I would say the bottom line on this one, I would consider this kind of a worthy successor to the universally decent Invicta 8926 OB, which is known for being kind of the best cheap watch you can get when it comes to a Rolex Submariner homage. So kind of, I guess, fitting that the next best Invicta that's come out since then has also been a Submariner homage, but one that is a little bit more on trend. You know, of course, a little late to the party because now every brand has vintage inspired divers. But here you're getting one with a hackable, hand-windable Seiko movement, with a design that is very true to form, to a very iconic and quite, of course, impossibly expensive timepiece. So it's not like you can just pick one up and it's going to be, you know, in the same price range. I honestly, when I saw this, I kind of think of it as what a lot of people were doing to Invicta 8926 OBs when they were modding them. There was a lot of guys that were shaving off the crown guards, swapping out the handsets or whatever to make them look like Black Bays or make them look like vintage subs. So I thought that that was really interesting that they kind of took you know, they took that note and moved on it, and they put a fine bevel on there they didn't have to put on, and they still kept it 200 meters of water resistant with a screw down crown, which they didn't have to do, and they even kept the display case back on there, which I think they could have got away with not doing and still charging the same price. So you're getting some little bonuses in there, and I think you put this thing on a nice NATO, and yeah, this thing's gonna probably be a looker. So keep an eye on my Instagram because you'll probably find me sporting this thing on a NATO at some point or time in the future. So with all that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do it like. If you're not, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.